So, what is the Heart of Arabia? Well, essentially, it's a podcast series about the recreation of a remarkable journey across Arabia by an explorer called Harry St John Philby back in 1917. I'm Pennie Stuart.
And I'm Dan Holland, and we are Adventurous Audio Limited, and we specialise in producing adventurous podcast projects. Now, what in particular grabbed us about this adventure story was not just Philby, who is a remarkable man, but we were especially taken by the man who's following in his footsteps, Mark Evans.
As well as being director of Outward Bound Oman, Mark is an explorer himself, and his enthusiasm and passion for Philby's story really captivated both of us, and we hope it will captivate you too. So let's meet Mark and hear how the recreation of the Heart of Arabia expedition came about.
It's 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun's just about to rise, and I'm sitting amongst some of the oldest living things in this country. I'm at 7,500 feet altitude on the top of some incredibly rocky mountains, surrounded by wonderful old juniper trees and wild olive trees, and the juniper trees are calculated to be almost 1,000 years old. So my name's Mark Evans. I consider myself incredibly lucky to be able to call two wonderful places home. One of those places is a small village west of Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland called Beaulieu. And when I'm not in Beaulieu, I'm here in this beautiful country called the Sultanate of Oman, which has been my home for 17 years. Just over 100 years ago, the North Pole had been claimed by explorers Peary and Cook, who were squabbling over each other's claims, and the South Pole had been taken by Amundsen, who'd beaten Scott. And the Explorers Club in New York considered that the greatest expanse of unexplored territory that remained was the empty quarter of Arabia, the great desert of central Arabia, the Rub al-Khali. And so the race was on in 1930 to become the first European to cross that great sand desert. And I've lived on the edge of that desert for the last 22 years of my life out here. And 6 years ago, myself and two Omani companions were lucky to be able to get the permission from King Salman in Riyadh, Prince Charles, Sultan Qaboos, and the royal family in Qatar to attempt to retrace that journey of 1930 that was successful in crossing that great sand desert, a journey undertaken by a British explorer called Bertram Thomas. So in 2015-16, three of us travelled on foot and by camel across the Rub al-Khali from Salalah in Oman to Doha, the capital of Qatar. It took us 49 days sleeping on the sand every night. Absolutely fantastic. When Bertram Thomas arrived in Doha, his claim to be the first European to cross made the front page news of all the newspapers around the world. And when one person heard news of that journey, it shattered his dreams. That man had his own ambitions to be the first European to cross, and reputedly he locked himself in a room on hearing this news for a week, muttering obscenities, and refused to come out. And that man was Harry St John Philby. And when Philby passed away in Beirut in 1960, his son Kim scratched on his grave the greatest of all Arabian explorers. And it's very hard to argue with that claim, because Philby, unlike other desert travellers like Thesiger and Thomas himself, Philby was a scholar of Arabia. He devoted his life to Arabia. He didn't pass through for a short period of time, undertaking a short journey. He was in Arabia until he passed away. He was a great scholar, a geographical scholar, a meticulous explorer, field scientist, constant curiosity of everything that surrounded him. And for his great journey of 1917, where he travelled from the east coast of Saudi Arabia to the west coast with the mission to meet Abdulaziz ibn Saud, for that great journey, which he called the Heart of Arabia when he wrote his book about it. He was awarded by King George in London the highest medal that the Royal Geographical Society could bestow, the Founders Medal. And later this year, my next project with some fantastic companions will be to retrace that 1917 journey undertaken by Philby, for multiple reasons that will become clear as this project unfolds. So the journey will start, leg one of the journey, we'll do it in 2 stages. We'll start on November the 15th, 16th, which was when Philby's boat landed. He sailed south from Basra, where it landed on the east coast of Saudi Arabia. So on that day in 2022, my own expedition will start. We'll be travelling again on foot, by Land Rover and by camel, retracing Philby's 1917 journey, but also exploring places that he travelled to and studied in the many years, the many decades within which he spent the remainder of his life in Arabia.
Mark Evans. When we heard about Mark's intention to retrace Philby's steps, we got in touch and suggested he captures his own journey through a series of audio diaries and podcasts.
And Mark is going to do just that. Each day from the desert, he'll send us diaries of his thoughts and his experiences, the research he and the expedition team are undertaking, and in particular his reflections from reading Philby's account of the same journey. And they'll be published on the Heart of Arabia Expedition podcast. We're hoping it will be a real insight into the sights, the sounds and the smells of the desert.
A chance to sit at Mark's shoulder and immerse ourselves in an Arabian adventure. But what we're then also going to do is to pull together some of the most captivating journal recordings into a series of podcasts, along with Mark's reflections, which we'll post up on Mark's return from Arabia.
And if you want to follow Mark's daily diaries, just follow the links on the Heart of Arabia Expedition website, or subscribe to the Expedition podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. The expedition starts in mid-November 2022, when daily updates will start landing in your device. And by subscribing, you won't miss his in-depth post-expedition podcasts either.